Revenge with Marvella. The conference room smelled like disinfectant and betrayal. I thought they were throwing me a birthday lunch. Instead, my son Marcus sat across from me, wearing his senior VP badge like armor. Dr. Holloway, the medical director, pushed a cardboard box toward me. Dr. Patricia Crane, he said, using my full name like I was a stranger. We're transitioning you out. Patient safety protocols require it. My hands stayed flat on the table. 69 wasn't ancient. I'd delivered twins during a blackout last month. Marcus wouldn't look at me. Mom, it's policy, he whispered. Policy. The word tasted like rust. They wanted my badge, my keys, my patience. Everything I'd built in 30 years. I signed nothing. As security walked me past the nurse's station, I felt my badge still clipped to my coat. Still active. Still broadcasting my credentials through every locked door in this building. Nobody had thought to deactivate it. I touched the plastic edge and felt something dangerous bloom in my chest. They thought I was finished. They were so very wrong. Marcus called that night. Not my son calling his mother. My son calling a problem he needed to contain. Mom, you need to accept reality, he said. His voice had that corporate smoothness now, the warmth surgically removed. Before things get ugly. I stood at my kitchen window, watching my reflection. What things, Marcus? Don't make this harder. The board's decision is final. Your age, my age performed flawlessly yesterday. Silence crackled between us. Then he said the words that changed everything. If you fight this, you'll hurt your own reputation. People are watching. People. He meant the board. His colleagues. His career. I thought about the daughter-in-law who stopped visiting. The grandchildren who suddenly had other plans. They'd been preparing for this. Isolating me. Making me dispensable. I understand, I told him. I did understand. Perfectly. After I hung up, I walked to my home office. The bottom drawer hadn't opened in years. The wood stuck, then gave. Inside lay a file folder marked with my name and a date from 1995. The year the hospital opened. The year my husband handed me this folder and said words I hadn't understood then. Words I understood now. The credentialing file was thick. Most pages were standard, my medical degrees, surgical certifications, board attestations. Then, near the back, I found it. A single page. Heavy stock paper, almost like parchment. At the top, pressed into the fiber itself, was a red wax stamp. Not printed. Not copied. Hand-pressed. The founding board seal. I'd forgotten this existed. My husband had been the hospital's first compliance attorney. He'd worked with the founding physicians to build something different. Something protected. Patricia, he'd told me the night before the hospital opened, we're writing protections into the foundation. Not just policies. Actual authority. I'd been too excited about the new surgical wing to pay attention. Now I read every word. The language was strange. Legal and medical merged into something almost ceremonial. It activated under specific conditions. When hospital leadership violated the core medical mission. When patient safety became subordinate to profit. When physicians were silenced for protecting patients. I traced the red stamp with one finger. My husband had been dead 8 years. But his words echoed. If leadership ever betrays medicine, that stamp wakes up. I pulled my laptop closer and started reading. The red stamp wasn't symbolic. It was a legal instrument. The founding board had created it during an era when corporate medicine was just beginning to devour independent hospitals. They'd seen what was coming. They'd built a failsafe. The designated credential holder, me, could invoke emergency medical authority when leadership violated patient care standards. It superseded executive decisions. It triggered mandatory state review. It couldn't be revoked except by unanimous founding board vote, and most of those physicians were dead. I cross-referenced the hospital charter. Still active. Still legally binding. The hospital had been acquired twice since 1995, but the charter language had survived both mergers, buried in legal boilerplate that corporate lawyers never read. I sat back, my heart hammering. They hadn't retired me because I was incompetent. They'd retired me because I was dangerous. Because I'd been raising concerns about shortened post-op observation times. About surgical schedules packed so tight that residents couldn't properly close. About incident reports that vanished into administrative black holes. I'd thought I was being ignored. I'd been wrong. I was being eliminated. The knock came 3 days later. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, stood on my porch holding a bakery box and wearing concern like a costume. "I wanted to check on you," she said. We sat in my kitchen. She asked about my garden, my knitting, whether I'd considered traveling. Then she circled closer. "The hospital needs to collect your archived patient notes," she said carefully. "For the transition. Just standard cleanup." I poured more tea. "Of course. When do they need them?" Relief flooded her face. "Tomorrow would be perfect." She ate a cookie. "You know, there's been some confusion in the ICU lately. A few unexpected outcomes. Nothing serious, but administration wants to review historical patterns." My hand stayed steady on the teapot. "Unexpected how?" "Oh, just complications. You know how it is." She smiled. "The Mortality Review Committee is probably being overly cautious." The Mortality Review Committee. I'd chaired that committee for 15 years. They hadn't invited me to a meeting in 8 months. "How many complications?" I asked. Jessica's smile flickered. "I'm not sure of the exact numbers." She was lying. She knew exactly. After she left, I sat very still. They weren't just covering mistakes. They were erasing evidence. I spent the next week in the medical library's public archive. The hospital published quarterly outcome reports required by state law. Publicly available. Carefully scrubbed. I started comparing. ICU complication rates had jumped 34% in 18 months. Post-surgical infections were up 28%. But the raw numbers were hidden behind adjusted risk calculations and footnotes about patient complexity. I pulled older reports. Before Marcus became VP. Before Dr. Holloway took over. The patterns were clear. Procedures were being rushed. Post-op monitoring was being shortened. Senior physicians were signing off on cases they'd never reviewed. I found my own incident reports in the public safety database. 14 alerts I'd filed in 2 years. Equipment failures. Understaffing. Protocol violations. Every single one marked resolved or addressed with no investigation notes. No corrective action. No follow-up. They'd been systematically closed. I photographed everything with my phone. Then I searched for the incident that had triggered Jessica's visit. It took 3 hours to find the mention. Buried in a footnote. One adverse ICU event under review. 1. They'd distilled multiple deaths into bureaucratic whisper. I drove home and threw up in my kitchen sink. I started playing the role they expected. When Marcus called, I answered slowly. I asked him to repeat things. I mentioned forgetting where I'd parked. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked. "Oh, fine, honey. Just tired." I let my words drift. Let him hear an old woman fading. He relaxed. Started talking to me like I was a child. When Dr. Holloway's assistant called about the patient files, I confused the dates. Asked what files? Then apologized profusely. She exhaled, patient and patronizing. "Don't worry, Dr. Crane. We'll handle it." Perfect. While they saw a confused elderly woman, I was rebuilding something they'd forgotten existed. Years ago, I'd helped design the hospital's incident tracking system. I'd pushed for redundancy, for backups, for mirrors. The hospital's current system ran on new software. But the old system, my system, had never been fully decommissioned. It had been archived. Not deleted. Archived. I still had the administrator login credentials in my password manager. I logged in from my home computer at 2 a.m. The mirror was still running. Still capturing incident reports, surgical logs, complication data. Everything. They'd forgotten I was the one who'd built this. They'd forgotten I knew where the bodies were buried. Literally. The hidden logs told a story. A surgical case from 3 months ago. A routine gallbladder removal. The assigned surgeon had been called to another emergency. Instead of rescheduling, an attending physician had been pressured to proceed despite inadequate or staffing. The surgery took twice as long. Post-op monitoring was cut short to free up the recovery bay. The patient developed complications at home. Sepsis. Then death. The incident report blamed unforeseeable patient factors. But the surgical log showed the truth. Insufficient staff. Inadequate monitoring. Administrative pressure to maintain throughput. The logs showed timestamps. Orders. Messages between executives about optimizing capacity. I found 16 more cases like it. Not all deaths, but all compromised by administrative shortcuts. All quietly reclassified or resolved without investigation. I watched one particularly damning video file. Executive meeting footage from the Mirror archive. Dr. Holloway presenting quarterly numbers. He mentioned efficiency improvements and resource optimization. The CFO praised him. Marcus, visible in the corner, nodded along. Not once did anyone mention patient outcomes. They were running a business. Medicine was the product. I downloaded everything to 3 encrypted drives. Then I sat in the dark, shaking. The executive meeting footage got worse. I found a session from last month. The chief of surgery, Dr. Vincent Pryor, stood at the front presenting staffing models. Older clinicians slow throughput, he said, and people laughed. My son laughed. They spend too much time on individual patients. We need volume. Dr. Holloway agreed. We're phasing out the senior staff gradually. Patricia Crane was the first. My name. Spoken like I was already dead. They discussed protocol changes. Shorter observation windows. Reduced pre-op assessments. Combined post-op rounds. Every change designed to move patients faster through the system. What about safety flags? Someone asked. Dr. Holloway waved it off. We'll adjust our risk models. The state looks at adjusted outcomes, not raw numbers. Then they approved another change. A patient death from the month before, one-eyed flagged, was being reclassified from preventable complication to expected outcome given patient complexity. The vote was unanimous. I watched my son's hand go up with the others. I turned off my computer and walked outside. The night air was cold. I couldn't feel it. I spent 2 days anonymizing the data, stripping identifying information, creating a summary report that showed patterns without violating patient privacy. Then I sent it to the State Medical Quality Board. 1 email. 14 pages of anonymized statistics showing impossible outcome discrepancies. No accusations. No names. Just numbers. And a single question at the end. Do these patterns warrant review? I used a secure email service. Untraceable. I sent copies to 3 different medical watchdog organizations. Then I waited. 4 days later, the hospital received a letter. Routine inquiry regarding outcome reporting methodologies. Not an investigation. Just questions. But in the medical world, questions were earthquakes. I heard about it from Maggie, a nurse I'd mentored. She called me excited. Dr. Crane, something's happening. They're freaking out upstairs. Some state inquiry. I made my voice confused. Oh? About what? Nobody knows. But they're pulling files. I thanked her and hung up. Then I smiled. The first domino was falling. Marcus called me that evening. His voice shook. Mom, did you do something? I put confusion in my voice. Do what, sweetie? Don't play games. We got a state inquiry. Someone leaked data. Leaked? What data? Medical outcomes. Incident reports. Someone with deep access. He paused. Someone who knows our systems. I let silence build. Then said, slowly, Marcus, I don't understand the technical terms anymore. This could destroy the hospital. His voice cracked. Did you, Marcus? I'm retired. Remember? You retired me. More silence. Then he said something that confirmed everything. Mom, listen. Some documentation was adjusted to protect the institution. That's normal. But if regulators misunderstand the context, adjusted. I let the word hang. We streamlined some reports. Made them clearer. Less alarmist. You mean falsified? That's not, Mom. You don't understand corporate medicine anymore. I understand patient care. This isn't about individual patients. This is about the institution's survival. I hung up. My hands were shaking. He'd just confessed. To me. His mother. The doctor he'd forced into retirement. He'd actually confessed. I saved the call recording. Every state required single-party consent. The recording was legal. and damning. I traced the altered reports systematically. Each one led back to the Director of Clinical Services, Dr. Francine Torres. I knew Francine. She'd been a good physician once. Now she signed whatever executives put in front of her. I cross-referenced her digital signature against the incident report timestamps. She was approving closures at impossible speeds. 15 incident reports resolved in one day. Each resolution identical. Each dismissing concerns as adequately addressed with 0 investigation notes. But Francine wasn't acting alone. Every closure had secondary approval from Dr. Holloway. And every case that reached Holloway had been pre-screened by executive leadership. Marcus's name appeared in the metadata. The pattern was clear. Intentional. Systematic. Corporate executives decided which problems to hide. Medical directors provided cover. The liability flowed downhill to physicians who were too scared or compromised to resist. I documented everything. Built a timeline. Showed the command structure. Showed the pressure. Showed the money. Because there was money. Each efficiency improvement coincided with executive bonuses. Each protocol shortcut preceded quarterly earnings reports. They were literally profiting from patient harm. I felt sick. I felt furious. I felt absolutely certain of what came next. I needed confirmation on the red stamp. I called Dr. Wallace Chin. No, I needed a different name. Dr. Wallace Griffin. One of the founding board members. 87 now, retired in Arizona. Patricia Crane, he said warmly. It's been years. We talked about retirement, grandchildren, golf. Then I asked my question. Wallace, do you remember the red stamp provision in the original charter? Long silence. Why are you asking about that? Because I think I need to use it. Another pause. Patricia, if you activate that mechanism, the state medical board walks in automatically. The hospital goes into mandatory ethics review. Everything stops. I know. Do you understand what that means? For your son. I closed my eyes. I understand what it means for patients. He sighed. Then you probably need to do it. But Patricia, once you pull that trigger, there's no stopping it. The charter was designed to be irreversible. To prevent intimidation. That's what I need. Then God help you. He paused. And God help them. After he hung up, I sat at my kitchen table. Patients were still in that building. Still trusting doctors who were being forced to compromise care. Still assuming the hospital's primary mission was healing. I hesitated for exactly 12 hours. Then I stopped hesitating. I invited Marcus and Jessica to dinner. Made pot roast his favorite. Set the table with my good dishes. When they arrived, I was the picture of elderly defeat. Slumped shoulders. Slow movements. Grateful for company. I've been thinking, I told them over dinner. Maybe you were right. Maybe I was holding on too long. Relief washed over both their faces. Mom, that's very mature, Marcus said. Jessica squeezed my hand. You should travel. Relax. They started talking freely. About the inquiry. About how they were weathering the investigation. About response strategies. It's just a routine review, Marcus said. We're providing context for the data. Explaining medical complexity to bureaucrats. What about the altered reports? I asked innocently. They exchanged glances. Not altered, Jessica corrected gently. Clarified. Medical documentation is often unclear. We just made the outcomes more accurately reflect patient factors. So you changed what happened? We changed how it was described. Marcus poured more wine. Medicine is complicated, Mom. Sometimes you have to simplify for regulators. They talked about frustrated nurses. About physicians who didn't understand the bigger picture. About the need to control narrative. I recorded everything. My phone lay face down beside my plate, microphone active. They never suspected. Why would they? I was just a confused old woman, finally accepting reality. That night, I uploaded the recording. Along with the incident reports. The falsified documentation. The executive meeting footage. The financial data linking bonuses to protocol violations. Everything. I uploaded it to the state medical ethics portal. A secure system designed for whistleblowers. Designed to protect physicians who reported institutional violations. The system generated an automatic case number. assigned an investigator, flagged the hospital for emergency review. I also sent copies to the State Attorney General's Healthcare Fraud Division, and to 3 major medical journals, and to 5 patient advocacy organizations. Then I activated the red stamp. The process was simple. I photographed my credential page with the red wax seal, filled out a digital form citing specific charter provisions, attached documentation of systematic patient harm, submitted at 5:58 a.m. on a Tuesday. By 6 a.m., the hospital's accreditation status changed to under emergency ethics review. All elective procedures were automatically paused. All patient safety audits were unlocked. Every incident report became available to state investigators, and hospital executives lost their override authority. The charter provision was absolute. No administrator could cancel the review. No board vote could stop it. The red stamp had woken up, and it was hungry. The hospital descended into chaos by noon. I heard about it through Maggie, who called me breathless. Dr. Crane, everything's locked down. Executives are losing their minds. They can't access safety reports. They can't modify anything. What happened? Nobody knows. Some kind of automatic ethics review. State investigators showed up at 9 a.m. I made my voice surprised. State investigators? They're pulling everything. Every case from the last 2 years. Dr. Holloway tried to block them, and they threatened to suspend our license entirely. Perfect. Exactly as the charter designed. The lockdown was comprehensive. All incident reports became read-only. All protocol changes suspended pending review. All executive bonuses frozen. The accreditation board sent their own team. 3 physicians with authority to suspend individual medical licenses on site. Dr. Holloway tried to shift blame to Dr. Torres, claimed she'd acted independently. The investigators pulled his emails, showed him his own approvals. He went silent. Marcus tried to argue administrative necessity. The investigators showed him the mortality data, the real numbers, without the statistical manipulation. 16 preventable deaths, 47 major complications, all linked to protocol shortcuts he'd approved. He asked for his lawyer. By 5 p.m., the hospital had made national news. Major medical center under investigation for patient safety violations. I watched the coverage from my living room, sipped tea, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The regulators worked fast. By the second day, they'd interviewed 50 staff members. Nurses spoke freely, protected by whistleblower provisions. They described pressure to discharge patients early, threats for filing incident reports, cases where they'd been overruled by administrators with no medical training. Junior physicians described impossible workloads, attending surgeons approving cases they'd never seen, complications dismissed as acceptable losses. Senior physicians described the same thing I'd experienced, concerns ignored, reports buried, slow isolation until retirement or resignation. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Holloway was suspended on day 3. His medical license placed under emergency review. Dr. Torres broke down and confessed everything. The pressure, the threats, the systematic falsification. She turned over emails showing direct orders from Marcus and the CFO. The CFO resigned. The hospital board went into emergency session. And Marcus called me crying. "Mom, please. You have to fix this." I let him sob. My career is over. Jessica's being investigated. They're talking about criminal charges. Are patients safe? I asked. What? Are the patients in that hospital safe right now? That's not Mom. They're going to take my license. I'll lose everything. You already lost everything. You just didn't know it. He begged. He pleaded. He promised reforms. I hung up. Then I turned off my phone. The next morning, I received an official letter. The hospital board requested my presence. Immediately. Urgent. I dressed carefully. Professional. Pressed. I wore my old hospital ID badge, still active, because they'd forgotten to deactivate it. When I walked through the main entrance, nurses stopped. Some smiled. Some nodded. One started clapping. Dr. Torres, waiting in the lobby with her lawyer, turned away. I took the elevator to the executive floor. The same conference room where they'd retired me. The same table. Different people sitting at it. The interim board chair, Dr. Helen Winters, stood. Dr. Crane. Thank you for coming. I sat. Folded my hands. What do you need? We need to understand what happened. You know what happened. No. We know the investigation was triggered. We know about the red stamp provision. Our lawyers found it yesterday. We know you activated it. She paused. What we don't understand is why. I pulled out my tablet. Showed them the video of their executives laughing about older clinicians. Showed them the mortality data. Showed them the falsified reports. Showed them patients who died because throughput mattered more than safety. That's why. Silence. Then Dr. Winters said quietly, we didn't know. Some of you didn't. But someone did. And the ones who knew protected each other instead of protecting patients. I stood. Is that all? Dr. Winters stopped me at the door. Dr. Crane, we need your help. I turned. The hospital is barely functioning. We have state monitors in every department. Accreditation is suspended. We're operating on emergency provisions. Good. Patients are being diverted to other facilities. Staff are panicking. If this continues, we'll have to close. I waited. We need someone to stabilize the situation. Someone the staff trusts. Someone the regulators trust. She took a breath. We're asking you to return as interim chief medical officer. The room went silent. I looked at each board member. Some wouldn't meet my eyes. You fired me 5 weeks ago for being too old. We were wrong. You said I was a danger to patients. We were lied to. By leadership we trusted. Dr. Winters stepped closer. I'm not asking you to forgive us. I'm asking you to save this hospital. For the patients who need it. For the staff who stayed honest. I could have said no. Should have said no. But I thought about Maggie. About the good nurses. About the physicians who'd tried to do right despite the pressure. I have conditions, I said. Dr. Winters nodded. Name them. My conditions were non-negotiable. First, full authority to restructure medical leadership. No executive veto. Second, mandatory reporting protections for all staff. Anonymous incident reporting with external review. Third, separation of medical decisions from financial pressure. Clinical chiefs report to me, not the CFO. Fourth, public disclosure of all investigation findings. Complete transparency. And fifth, my son and everyone involved in the falsification face full accountability. No quiet resignations. No severance packages. No protection. The board voted. Unanimous approval. I became interim chief medical officer that afternoon. My first act was to release the full investigation report to the staff. Unredacted. Names attached. The second act was testifying to the state medical board. I provided documentation. Timelines. Evidence. I named names. Marcus sat in the hearing room, pale and silent. When the board chair asked if I had anything else to add, I looked at my son. Medicine isn't a business, I said. Patients aren't products. Hospitals don't exist to generate profit. They exist to heal. I turned back to the board. When we forget that, people die. When we prioritize efficiency over safety, people die. When we silence the physicians who raise concerns, people die. I held up the list. 16 people died in this case. 16 families lost someone. Because executives wanted better quarterly numbers. The board deliberated for 2 hours. Then they announced their findings. Dr. Holloway lost his medical license. Permanently. No appeal. Dr. Torres received a 5-year suspension with mandatory ethics retraining. The CFO faced criminal charges for healthcare fraud. And Marcus, my son, lost his medical credentials and his administrative position. He'd never work in healthcare again. He found me afterward in the parking lot. Mom, please. Appeal for me. Tell them I was pressured. You were pressured. And you caved. You chose your career over your patients. I chose the hospital's survival. You chose money. I unlocked my car. You want to know the real reason I did this? It's not revenge. It's not anger. I looked at him. It's because those 16 people deserved better. And the next 16 deserve better. And if you'd kept going, there would have been a next 16. I'm your son. And you're a doctor who forgot what that means. I drove away. Jessica filed for divorce 3 weeks later. My grandchildren stopped speaking to me. Half my family sided with Marcus. I lost dinners, holidays, relationships. I didn't regret a single thing. Rebuilding took months. I started with the basics. Restored proper staffing ratios. Reinstituted mandatory post-op observation periods. Gave nurses authority to halt procedures if safety concerns arose. Every protocol change was reviewed by practicing physicians, not administrators. I created an external patient safety board with community oversight. Every serious incident required public reporting. Every mortality was reviewed by independent physicians. I rehired 3 physicians who'd been forced out for raising concerns. I promoted Maggie to director of nursing. And I established the Crane Fellowship for Medical Ethics, funded by the fines the hospital paid, designated for training physicians in advocacy and institutional courage. The hospital slowly recovered. Accreditation was restored after 6 months. Patient outcomes improved. Staff morale improved. Turnover decreased. We'd never be what we were, but we'd become what we should have been. The local news ran a profile on me. They called me a hero. I hated it. Heroes don't let things get this bad. Heroes act sooner. I'd acted when forced. When cornered. When I had nothing left to lose. That wasn't heroism. That was survival. But I accepted the label anyway. Because it helped. It gave the staff something to rally behind. It gave patients confidence. It gave the hospital a narrative of redemption. And narratives matter. On my 70th birthday, the hospital threw me a party. A real one this time. Staff filled the cafeteria. Nurses brought cake. Physicians gave speeches. Dr. Winters presented me with an award. For courage, integrity, and unwavering commitment to patient care. I accepted graciously. Said a few words about teamwork and mission. Then I went home and cried. Because Marcus wasn't there. Because my grandchildren weren't there. Because I'd burned my family to the ground to save strangers. The next day, I received a letter. Handwritten. From Marcus. It said, I understand why you did it. I don't forgive you. But I understand. I'm working at a free clinic now. Seeing patients who have nothing. Who need everything. Who remind me why I went to medical school. I'm not the doctor I was. Maybe I'll become the doctor I should have been. I don't know if you'll ever read this. But I needed to say it. Thank you. And I'm sorry. And I hope someday we can sit in the same room without it hurting. I read it 17 times. Then I wrote back. We didn't reconcile. Not that year. Maybe not ever. But we started talking. Carefully. Painfully. Like strangers learning each other's language. It was something. It wasn't enough. But it was something. I stepped down as CMO after 18 months. The hospital was stable. New leadership was in place. Physicians I trusted. People who understood that medicine serves patients, not shareholders. My replacement was Dr. Kenneth Hayes, a 52-year-old trauma surgeon with a reputation for both excellence and ethics. He'd walked away from a prestigious position at a corporate hospital after they'd pressured him to reduce ICU stays. He understood. The staff threw me another party. Smaller this time. More personal. Maggie made a speech that made me cry. You taught us that speaking up matters. That one person can change everything. That being old doesn't mean being done. I hugged her hard. You did the actual work, I whispered. I just started it. You did more than that. You showed us it was possible. I retired for real this time. Moved to a small house near the coast. Started painting. Something I'd wanted to do for 40 years. I was terrible at it. I loved it. I painted sunsets. Waves. Abstract colors that meant nothing and everything. I painted the hospital sometimes. Not as it was, but as it should be. As it was becoming. Marcus visited once. Awkward. Formal. But he came. We walked on the beach. Didn't talk much. He left after an hour. 3 months later, he came back. Stayed longer. Started talking about his patients at the free clinic. Started remembering why medicine mattered. We weren't healed. But we were healing. A journalist called me last week. Wanted to do a feature on medical whistleblowers. I almost said no. Then I thought about the 16 families, about the nurses who'd been silenced, about the physicians who'd walked away rather than compromise. What do you want people to know? She asked. I thought for a long time. That being old doesn't mean being irrelevant. That experience matters. That institutional memory is power. I paused. And that when leadership betrays their mission, somebody has to remember what the mission was. Do you regret how you handled it? I regret that it was necessary. I regret not acting sooner. I regret the cost. I looked at the ocean. But I don't regret protecting patients. That's the only part that matters. What would you tell other physicians facing similar situations? That courage isn't comfortable. That doing the right thing often means losing everything. That institutions will choose self-preservation over truth. I smiled. And that sometimes, one person with a red stamp can change everything. The article published last month. I got letters. Hundreds of them. From nurses. From physicians. From patients who'd lost family members to medical negligence. From people who needed to believe that fighting back was possible. I answered every one. At 69, they decided I was done. They were wrong. I wasn't done. I was just getting started, wanting to know if I had regrets. My husband's family tried to erase me at 60, I told her. They thought being a widow made me powerless. They forgot I was still commissioned. I touched Thomas's headstone. They tried to erase a widow. They forgot I was still an officer. The judge had paused when my rank was confirmed. That pause changed everything. At 60, they decided I was done. The judge reminded them who I really was.